Greensboro City Council. Can I have a motion to come back into open session? Moved by Mr. Matheny, seconded by Mrs. Abuzawader. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. We will begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence, and I would like us to think of our neighbors in Raleigh and the tragedy that they had a few days ago, and to all of our friends and neighbors who are victim to senseless gun violence. Thank you. Mrs. Hightower, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Katie Dorset Council Chamber. Residents may sign up to speak by 6 p.m. by using the QMinder kiosk just outside the chamber door. Please see the courier for assistance. Council procedure for the conduct of meeting. Motions and votes will be conducted electronically. Each member of council must vote unless there is a direct conflict. We do allow for and welcome speakers to address council on agenda items. Council respects the right for the public to speak about matters of concern that can be addressed by council. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes. Comments that seem to be intended to incite unlawful behavior will be deemed to be out of order. Zoom participants are requested to mute their microphones until they are called upon to speak. Zoning matters allow for a 15-minute presentation, both for and against the rezoning. There is a 5-minute rebuttal for each side. Following the introduction of each case, if applicable, staff will make a presentation before opening the floor for questions from council members. The mayor will call upon speakers in the order in which they are registered. And at that time, if they are on Zoom, their lines or account will be unmuted. All speakers should identify themselves with their name for the record. Once an item has been completed, the meeting host will remove speakers for said item from the Zoom call. Council will make a motion and a second to close the public hearing. The floor will be open for council deliberations and discussions, motions, and seconds to move an item. They should be done electronically and voted by roll call vote. The mayor will announce the vote results. The city of Greensboro is committed to promoting an environment that is free of discrimination, bias, and bullying. Thus, harassment, words, jokes, actions, comments based on an individual's sex, sexual orientation, race, ethnic background, age, religion, or any other physical condition or legally protected characteristic will not be tolerated. In order to consider written comments, please submit them online to the city's website, www.greensboro-nc.gov. We do have a consent agenda for items G1 through G27, which are a grouping of agenda items that are voted on with one single vote to expedite what are believed to be routine and non-controversial items. Any council member may withdraw an item from the consent agenda for the purpose of voting no. Items removed from the consent agenda for discussion will be placed on the November 15th City Council business agenda. This meeting does include closed captioning. Depending on the length of tonight's meeting, we may take a short recess around 7:30. Now is the time to make a special presentation. Item number E1 is a resolution recognizing the Innovation Project Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Sharon L. Contreras. Dr.
Sharon.
Wells?
Good evening. Thank you. Resolution recognizing the Innovation Project's Chair Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Sharon L. Contreras. Whereas Dr. Sharon L. Contreras, a transitional leader and a passionate supporter for children and education, grew up in Uniondale, New York, with 9 brothers and sisters. Whereas at the age of 10, she became an early advocate for her rights when she was refused entry into a new gift program, pled her case to gain a seat in the accelerated courses. With that acceptance altered the trajectory of her life and lit a fire for achievement and advocacy for others. Whereas even the gradual loss of 95% of her hearing did not stop her from breaking barriers for herself.
Whereas over the course of 30 years, her career, 30-year in education, Dr. Contreras has held 2 superintendencies, being the first woman of color to lead the Syracuse City School District, one of New York's Big 5 school systems, and the first woman and Latino to superintend Guilford County Schools, one of the nation's largest school districts in North Carolina, with 126 schools and 10,000 employees. Whereas Dr. Contreras is celebrated for implementing policies aimed at closing achievement gaps and improving students' life outcome, helped to close the Guilford County graduation rate gap, expanded technical career education and advanced placement programs, and increased access to dual workforce enrollment for students and their parents. Whereas Dr. Contreras' high school tutoring initiative and learning hubs are considered a national model for addressing unfinished learning during the pandemic, and increased the Guilford County Schools graduation rate to its highest ever, 91.8%. Whereas Dr. Contreras formed the Joint Facilities Committee consisting of the Guilford County Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners, testified before the United States House Committee on Education and Labor on the unacceptable state of crumbling school facilities, which resulted in the approval of $300 million by taxpayers to address infrastructure needs, and led the initiative to approve the largest individual school bond referendum in North Carolina's history, including an additional $1.7 billion to address the district's facilities master plan.
Whereas in 2019, Dr. Contreras was named Superintendent of the Year by North Carolina Parent Teacher Association, known as the PTA. North Carolina Regional Superintendent of the Year by the Piedmont Triad Educational Consortium in 2020. A top 5 finalist for the Green Garner Urban Education Leadership Award by the Council of the Great City Schools in 2020. Among Triad Business Journal's most admired chief executive officers in 2020. The 2022 American Association of School Administrators, AASA, Women in School Leadership Award recipient, and named to the Business North Carolina Power List in 2022. Whereas Dr. Contreras holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis, and a Master of Science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a Master of Arts English Literature, a Master of Arts in Teaching, and a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from the State University of New York at Binghamton. And in 2022, was named the Chief Executive Officer of the Innovation Project in North Carolina. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Greensboro that the city council recognizes the accomplishments and contributions of Dr. Sharon L. Contreras to the administration and staff of the Guilford County School System and beyond. That a copy of this resolution shall be presented to Dr. Sharon L. Contreras as a symbol of the gratitude of the people of Greensboro for her unwavering devotion to the academic achievements of youth and for her advocacy of educational endeavors throughout our community. So we congratulate you with this resolution. Would you come?
So,
Second. I second the adoption.
Can we move the item?
so it,
We did. We moved the item.
Good evening, Mayor Vaughn, and to the City Council. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. I just want to say briefly, it is an honor to take care of other people's children. And it's humbling, it's a blessing, but it's also an arduous task. But we've accomplished so much together as a community, passing $2 billion in bond dollars to also increasing the graduation rates. And one of the biggest accomplishments is the work we did together to provide transportation during a crisis. No other district in the state tried to solve that in the way we quickly solved that with the city of High Point. And not only did you solve that problem or help us solve that problem, but it did something else. Students now are enrolled in dual programs, dual credit courses at the university. Those who could not participate in after-school programs can now participate in sports, in other activities, because we had the courage to do something about that. I encourage us all this evening to continue to do the hard work. And as Brian Stevenson said, always be proximate to the problem. And I know, Sharon, you're a stickler for this. Stay in the community and listen to those we serve. So many children have so little, and I don't think we realize how little they actually have. Yet there's a movement to push us even backwards and give those who have the least even less. Let us serve and answer our calling, live our lives in a way that is worthy of our calling, and do what is right by those that we serve. I thank you for everything you have done, all your partnership with the school district, and the way in which you show up every single day to serve the great city of Greensboro. It's been an honor. Thank you so very much.
Dr. Contreras, I would just like to say a couple of things real quickly. During 2020, when COVID first started, I said, I think the two hardest jobs in the city of Greensboro, Guilford County, were the police chief and the superintendent of schools. No matter what you did, you were going to make somebody unhappy. And I think you made very strong principled decisions to keep our children and staff safe as that we possibly could. I can't imagine the pressure you felt as an individual, knowing that you had all of these competing things coming at you. And I want you to know how much I appreciate the strong stance that you took, because it was important to be strong in that role. So thank you for doing that. I would also want to thank you for the two bonds, the 300 million and the 1.7, bringing the bond referendum to $2 billion. That is a huge number. And I think it is wonderful for our students who are currently enrolled, the students who will be enrolled, that they will get a better experience. Not only we can also use that as an economic development tool, because I think it shows companies who are looking at us, what do we value? And the fact that the people of Guilford County voted to invest $2 billion into our public school system, I think says a lot about where our values and who we value. So thank you for spearheading that and making that go through. You really have left a long legacy with Guilford County and the city of Greensboro. Thank you.
And we do have the chairman of the school board with us tonight, Dina Hayes, and some of the staff members, Linda Wilson, and someone that I recognize, and a student and a parent. So thank you for being here.
So I just want to thank Dr. Contreras. Yeah, sometimes we didn't quite see eye to eye, but I know that her heart was for the community, just like she knows mine. And so the greater thing that we've accomplished at District 1 gets several brand new schools. Our children will go to state-of-the-art schools, like you told me. And I'm excited about what your vision is going to really unfold in District 1, particularly. So thank you for, all of you. You're just a tough lady. I'll tell you that. It's a hard job you got, but you make it look easy. So this community really thanks you very much for all your efforts. And we pray you don't go away. You just temporarily not here for the moment, but you're always here in our community. And I thank you for that very much.
Dr. Contreras, Maya Angelou said, people won't remember what you say. They won't remember what you do, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And you made a lot of students and a lot of parents feel very special in this city, and we thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. I do want to remind council, we have this new software system. We are going to try to start using it to its maximum. And I would like us to focus on using the request to speak button, which will be at the top of your screen. And that will enable me to know who has signed up to speak and in what order. So you'll see it'll be a blinking request to speak when the item comes up. And also if you could move the item on the screen and verbalize it at the same time, that will help the confusion of who voted, who first did and who seconded. So we will now move on to our consent agenda. Does anybody need to?
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Hoffman, a second by Mr. Holston. Council, please vote. And that passes 9-0. We will now move on to our public hearing portion of the agenda. We will take H1 and H2 together.
Just H1, please.
Just
Just
H1, Your
H1.
Honor. It's the ordinance amendment is just H1,
Okay.
then the rest will be
I see.
dispatched. Thank you.
H1 is a public hearing for the adoption of an amendment to the Land Development Ordinance, amending sections 30-4-1.4B and 2 mailed notice and 30-4-1.2 applicant's summary of neighborhood communications related to mailed notices and neighborhood communications contained within the Land Development Ordinance, LDO.
Great, thank you. The text amendment before you tonight is a amendment to the Land Development Ordinance, Chapter 30 of the General Code. And as part of the public hearing process for rezonings in the city of Greensboro, it has provisions for mailed notices and provisions for neighborhood communication. On the mail notice side of things, it requires a notification be mailed to the property owners located within 600 feet. And if there are residents located within 600 feet, the applicant is required to submit a summary of their neighborhood communication. This text amendment changes that dimension from 600 feet to 750 feet. In order to increase the public participation in the rezoning process, the planning department proposes that the distance be increased to 750 feet. At its September 19th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this text amendment. We are here tonight as a public hearing item before the City Council, and the City Council has several options on either amending the land development ordinance by approving this text amendment or denying the text amendment and leaving the dimension at 600 feet, or they can instruct staff to make changes and we can bring it back at a later meeting. That concludes the presentation. If there's any questions, I'll entertain them at this time.
Do we have speakers?
Well, no, we don't have any speakers on this item.
Move the resolution.
So
So wait,
could we allow Mrs. Hightower to move this resolution because this is something she has worked on for.
Well, I'll
For
second
months.
it then.
So moved by Mrs. Hightower, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
And I,
If you
Motion
see the up towards the top, that blue bar. Right now it says vote in progress, but you will then,
but I moved it to speak. It's giving me something here. What is it giving me?
so it passes 9-0.
Update, okay. Well, I did motion to speak, but I don't.
So if you
It didn't-
see
the timer-
now,
The timer didn't start. See,
so Sharon, look at the blue bar up at the top. It should be blinking.
I've got a timer.
Excuse me?
I've got a timer, but it's not moving.
You don't have a blinking.
Okay, well, I know that you would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for acknowledging I did like to speak. This has been kind of something been in the works for quite a while. And the reason we moved it from 600 feet to 750, I know people say, well, that's not a lot, but that's the most that our ordinance will allow us to do without going to the state to expand notification. And you would say, why do this? But in many neighborhood meetings that I've attended, many conversations that I've had in communities, they go, well, why didn't I get noticed? Why didn't I find out about this? And sometimes they live right across the street, next door. They're right over the 601. And so just trying to make sure that communities are more inclusive and being a part of the growth that we're seeing in the city. We are growing a lot. We're seeing a lot of rezonings. And so we want to make sure that people have a say. You know, talked to a couple of zoning attorneys. They understand it. They're okay with it as well. I believe Treby reviewed it and supported it as well. They understand that the more we grow, the more we have to make sure people are included. So we could only go to 750, but I will tell you that just recently I found out that Reedsville does 1,000 feet. So 750 is not a lot as we think. They do 1,000 feet notification. So I guess you can have as high of a number as you want to have. But currently this is where we are. So I appreciate zoning and planning. I think they voted for it unanimously as well. And so I look forward to seeing if we can do more. But right now I appreciate us getting to this point. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also want to say that having served previously as the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, that a lot of the members there are also very excited about seeing this increase. There are oftentimes, as Councilwoman Hightower mentioned, that those lines of 600 feet don't necessarily incorporate all of the community. I've also said myself in the past that if I can hear a siren, then that's my community. And a lot of times that's beyond that 600, even the 750 feet. But this is a great step in the right direction. And I know that our communities are going to benefit from it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to items.
Did we vote?
We did vote, yes. Items H2 through H4 will be read together. H2 is a public hearing for an ordinance annexing territory into the corporate limits for property located at the rear portion of 8836 West Market Street, 2.6 acres, then Drong and N Ducat. Public H3, public hearing for an ordinance for original zoning for 8836 West Market Street, Rick Ringler for N Ducat and Thang Drawn. And item H4, public hearing for an ordinance for original zoning for a portion of Marshall Smith Street right-of-way, City of Greensboro. We do have a speaker in favor. So I guess we can call on him if we have any questions. If you would like to give us a brief overview.
Great, thank you. The annexation, original zoning and rezoning before you tonight contains approximately 4.47 acres and is located on the northeast corner of West Market Street and Marshall Smith Road. The area to the north is zoned multifamily 18. The area to the east is zoned public institutional and light industrial. The area to the south is zoned heavy industrial, and the area to the west is zoned commercial medium and agricultural AG. The property to the north of this site, as you can see from the aerial photo, is a proposed multifamily project that is under construction at this time. The uses located to the east are a roofing contractor and an office. The uses located to the south are manufacturing. And the uses located to the west is an eating and drinking establishment and undeveloped property. This property is shown as commercial mixed use on the future land use map and urban general on our future built form map. This is a original zoning and rezoning for the property, and there is a conditions associated with this rezoning request, and they're on the screen before you. Staff has recommended approval of the request because the western area future land use map currently designates the property as commercial mixed use in support of the West Market Street Village Planning Subarea. The GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plans Built Form Map designate these properties as urban general, along with a possible workforce transit corridor. The proposed original zoning and rezoning requests support the comprehensive plan growing economic competitiveness big idea to build a prosperous, resilient economy that creates equitable opportunities to succeed, and the comprehensive plans filling in our framework big idea to arrange our land uses to where we live, work, and attend a school, shop, and enjoy our free time can create a more vibrant and livable Greensboro. The proposed conditional district commercial medium and the CM zoning districts permit a variety of commercial, retail, office, and service uses compatible with existing commercial, office, and industrial and civic uses located on the adjacent properties. That concludes the presentation, and I'll now open it up for the public hearing.
We do have a speaker, one speaker signed up in favor. Rick Ringler.
Assume we left the microphone on. Yes, okay, Rick Ringler from Timmons Group, 8642 Mitchell Road, representing the owners of this property right now. It's currently, very underutilized. It's got one single family home on it. And so with the development going on around it, especially to the north, the large multifamily development, there's going to be roughly 200 units of residential property right there that would be well within walking distance to be able to get over to this site. It's a minority owned facility. The main thing they want to do is they want to open up a Vietnamese restaurant. That's their business. But then they're also going to develop the remaining parcels property there to provide, other additional services. This is, the first hurdle to get through is the rezoning and everything. However, there is one other hurdle that comes after this that we're kind of looking at right now, and that's to deal with the traffic study that was prepared for this. According to the initial traffic study, it's gone through review by people at the city and DOT, and they're telling us at this point that they are going to require this property to install the traffic signal at the intersection of Marshall Smith and West Market Street. It's not definite yet. There's another additional analysis that we're working on in order to do that. But if that comes back where they are responsible to fully construct and install the traffic signal, it's going to be offered estimates anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000. A development of 4 acres of this size cannot reasonably justify paying that much and make this property work. So hasn't been set in stone yet. We're still working on it, but that is a big concern that we have that may make this project not really being feasible. Just here, if you have any other questions regarding anything as far as timing or what their other issues, I'm here to answer any questions.
Mr. Matheny has properly requested to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yay, it worked.
It works.
Thank you for coming down and speaking. Some of these cases, when there's no opposition, sometimes folks don't show up. What you just said is something that Mr. Manager has been a pain in my side for many, many years. I don't understand the process in which we're going to do these traffic studies. The one that I can think of was the traffic study when we had a meeting about 8 months ago when they wanted a traffic analysis in the central business district, which, as you agreed, made no sense whatsoever. And then we've got a project on Church Street that does not require a traffic study, yet I drove it this morning and I drive it every day after I drop my daughter off at school. And I know it needs a traffic study on Church Street north of Fiscal Church. And there is a traffic study on Lawndale that it was suggested to a potential development of 80 housing units on Lawndale, which I can't imagine how many cars travel from downtown to the Science Center and north. So how we do all this for this small development of a restaurant that mandates, first of all, I would have fault that you did not have to do a traffic study because that's a bearing on the development that shouldn't have been there. And the thought process to lay one restaurant to have a $200-some thousand stoplight when the city agreed to do 200 residential units does not make a whole lot of sense. And so my hope would be that that would not be the case and that we can find logic, not only in this development, but for future developments throughout the city of Greensboro. So we've got to have a better process when it relates to traffic studies. And I will tell you, you'll probably, council members, hear me say that at any development or rezoning that comes up, no matter where it comes up, if there's a traffic study. Mr. Manager, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not a traffic expert, but I can.
You are a traffic expert.
But I can tell
That's
you
why we
that.
hired you.
But I know Hannah is in the room and I'll try to speak for her a little bit, but I do know that there are certain thresholds that trigger traffic impact studies. And those usually associated with vehicular trips generated by particular use. While the use may seem like it's small, it could be that a lot of trips are going to be generated as a result of this. I know that GDOT has its own standards, but so does the state, even nationally, in terms of what you can require. But without going into the details, I do know that there's also been conversations with Trobic, with regards to requirements for TIS, or traffic impact studies. And I know that our land development ordinance has been amended to reflect some of those traffic driven requirements. But again, I definitely am not going to say we're not going to take another look. I think we can, and I think we should. If there are thresholds that we set ourselves and they're not state or federal, I think maybe we can have some wiggle room. But I will always say that these things are more objective than subjective than anything else. So,
You know, I hear what you're saying. One of the first things that I would ask would be, as it relates to the city of Greensboro and the state of North Carolina having traffic impact analysis, are we in line with the state, or are we doing more than what the state would suggest? And I would offer,
Can I just say one thing? We're kind of going far on
From
this
him.
rezoning.
but
Can
it's
we-
important, because if
Yes.
we don't get this cleared up for him, then they're not doing you upzoned your property, which would be congratulations. And I'll make the motion if it hasn't been, to close the public hearing.
You motion to close the public hearing second. Well, if there are no, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? That passes 9-0.
So I hear what you're saying, Mayor.
Well, I'm sorry, Tammy had been signed up to speak
Yeah.
before the motion.
Yeah.
Um,
Mr. Manager, we got to fix this. We just got to fix it, because this is a restaurant. And if there's a restaurant going in East Greensboro and that restaurateur has to do a traffic impact analysis for $10,000 or $15,000, that doesn't, for a small restaurant on market or friendly, doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense here.
Mrs. Thurm, I apologize.
That's okay. I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Matheny's comments. You know, when we passed that zoning for the multifamily property, there was quite a bit of discussion from the residents that are currently living here about a traffic study and about that intersection and about lighting that intersection. And I can't begin to imagine that a restaurant is going to cause more traffic at that intersection than the 200 plus housing units. I think we need to, as we're looking at this, look in terms of perhaps prorating. Maybe he puts us over the threshold and perhaps a small fraction of that cost, but it's not fair to these folks. And I'm concerned about that because we're about to rezone a piece of property and then it's going to sit if this person has to put 200 and some odd $1,000 into a street light. And so are we rezoning this property? I'm in support of the rezoning, but are we doing this in the right order? Unless we are fairly certain that we can help mitigate the cost of this street light. You know, I don't know if we're doing this in the right order. Looks like Chuck wants to say something legally, and we probably can't use that as a judgment, but.
Well, I mean, the issue on the table is the highest best use of this property. These discussions around a traffic light and traffic studies and so forth, certainly important, but they're not germane to the issue on the table.
You're right. And what I would say is going forward, that this is something that we should make sure we deal with in the proper order so that we don't rezone a piece of property and then find out that they can't use it for what they want to rezone it for because we're throwing up an impediment just in the future.
Right, but the proponent is proposing this. I don't think staff is proposing this. I mean, they've consulted with staff supports it, but this is the proponent's motion.
But the traffic light is required by staff.
All I'm saying is I'd like to have this work in the future. It would be great if we could work through how best to handle this before it came for a zoning vote.
I would agree.
Ms. Abuzawader?
So I would first like to know exactly what staff has proposed. And second, I think it's very important to discuss this. If that has been proposed, Because as already been mentioned up here, the probable traffic is not necessarily going to come from a small restaurant. Has staff proposed anything concerning a stoplight? And if not, where is the feeling of the developer that it will be required?
Mr. Attorney, I have a thought.
Sure.
Could we vote to approve this rezoning? And I don't know the vernacular I'm thinking about. Vote to approve the rezoning and direct the city manager to go back and review the traffic analysis to determine if the city should put a traffic signal there. In other words, approve the rezoning, not contingent on the property owner putting the signal in.
I mean, yeah, the answer is yes, but
Yeah, so I'll be very careful with that. The reason is because you're focusing on one project. If you're not taking, if you take action on this project to rezone it and ask us to go back and take a look at the traffic signals, you may end up shifting that burden or that conversation to another day. So I think it's more of a cumulative impact of different developments at this intersection. So if it's not this one, it's going to probably be another project at some point in the future. So again, Anna, maybe I'm speaking out of school.
But it doesn't mean that we have to stick one development with the cost on something that the city, whether the city council or the city staff, has agreed to develop in this neighborhood. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like we force people to build sidewalks. We force people to do this. We force people to do that, instead of thinking about it from a holistic planning standpoint and creating logic. There are 10 different developments over there. This is one, and we're sticking one person with a light. That's not fair. The city should do that.
I think there's a process going on with respect to that. My concern with bringing these non-highest and best use issues up in the context of a decision about highest and best use is that you may run into a claim that this is some kind of contract zoning. So, and which is verboten. So I would prefer that the interest in treating this guy fairly is clear. I'm sure staff will pursue it, but the decision about this property is about this property's highest and best use.
Regardless of anything that staff.
Correct.
Okay, fine.
Well, and I do have to say, the whole idea of people signing up to speak is that we would allow people to speak in the order which they signed up. So Mary Kay.
Yes, I was not quite finished, but that's okay. So I understand we are only voting on the rezoning of this property. I understand that. However, I was just wanting clarification on why the developer believes they are going to have to put a stoplight. I think I can ask that clarification since they mentioned it. So Mr. Galante or Ms. Cochran, who might have that answer?
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer.
Please.
So good evening, Hannah Cochran, Director of Transportation. In your packet, there is a copy of the executive summary of the draft traffic impact study that was completed by an outside consultant. That was required because the number of trips from the whole site that's being rezoned, not just one restaurant, that's one component of what they are proposing, generated a sufficient number of daily trips and peak hour trips to require the analysis. It is still in draft form. As the speaker alluded to, we have some additional techniques that we can go through to mitigate some of those potential impacts, because a traffic signal at this intersection now is recommended with the addition of these trips. So it is a cumulative, as the city manager indicated, process. So some developments will not require those things, others will, and those requirements are based on the best practices in national traffic analysis and traffic practice. So I'm happy to go into much more detail about the ins and outs of when those requirements are triggered and provide those at another time. But we've made that information available to council. We've also just recently completed a very deep dive with a work group of TREBIC members to look at what our standards are compared to standards across North Carolina and other cities and the standards of NCDOT, and came to some concurrence that we were going to make some modifications and provide additional support and information as we go forward, but feel confident that where we are today is state of practice across North Carolina.
Okay, thank you. And I realize that that is in the executive summary. I would prefer in the future, because we look through all, I know that I diligently read through everything, and I did not see that because it was at the very end. So if there's an executive summary that kind of states what we need to be concerned about, or if it could be at the front, because the staff reports, we know it's a template. And normally we don't expect for an executive summary to be at the end. So I think that would be helpful moving forward, if that's agreeable, Mr. City Manager or staff.
Mr. Holston?
Yes, Ms. Cochran, just so I'm clear, are we saying that the threshold for the traffic study, and I think you mentioned the developments, there's a lot of movement going on. But the threshold is that the last one in is the one that has to pay for in this case, the traffic light.
So all those are unique circumstances that are specific to individual locations and the accumulation of development that's anticipated over time, and the background traffic changes as well. So it's hard to answer that question in a way that is a yes or a no. We look at every site that does require a traffic analysis independently, and in consideration of the other development that we know is occurring, so that we are accurately depicting what we are anticipating for traffic.
So we have in this case that we can review, approve, or deny the case as it is, and then going forward, look at some of the other options I think you mentioned earlier.
Yes, and we work directly with the projects as they come through the technical review committee review process to manage for those individual impacts.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hightower? Sharon?
Oh, sorry. First, I told you my computer wasn't working. So thank y'all for coming and fixing it. And I think you kind of asked the question I was going to ask Hannah. So pretty much what I'm hearing, I know we're talking about something kind of off topic. I get that, but kind of what I'm hearing is because of the previous projects that have gone in, that's kind of driving the numbers up to where the TIA now states there's some other things that need to happen, like the light. So so what I'm hearing is, like you're saying, put the developments in and we'll get things like restaurants and retail. But what I'm hearing is you put them there, but now they're causing a burden for the retail to come in. Because if they gotta be the one that puts the lights in, after you've put in the developments, then they may prevent them from being able to bring that. And maybe at a later date, we can look at, maybe there are some grants, some programs, some things that would help, particularly if we're talking, or any small business, because that would be a barrier for any small business going in, trying to, be a part of the community. So I would like to hear more about what is available out there funding wise, because we keep telling people we need more rooftops in order to get more businesses. But then if you get more rooftops, then they're stopping businesses from coming because of the other requirements on the other end. That's a problem that I see, particularly in the area I represent and serve too. So, but the restaurant sounds like a great idea, and I hope they can get something worked out.
Call the question.
I have a motion on H2, which is the annexation.
Madam Mayor, it was moved by Councilmember Holston and seconded by Councilmember Hoffman.
Okay, council, please vote. That passes 9-0. Item number H3. That requires a statement of consistency. Moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Mrs. Boozwaiter. Mrs. Thurm?
The Greensboro City Council believes that its action to approve the original zoning and rezoning request for the property described as 8836 West Market Street from County AG and County AG to City CDCM to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 comprehensive plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with comprehensive plan's future built form map and future land use map. The proposed city CDCM rezoning district as conditioned permits uses which fit the context of surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Council, please vote. That passes 9-0. And item H4 also requires a statement of consistency.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Holston, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Holston?
Yes. Excuse me. The Greensboro City Council believes that its action to approve the original zoning and rezoning request for the property described as a portion of Marshall Smith Road right-of-way from County AG Agricultural and City AG Agricultural to City CM Commercial Medium to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 comprehensive plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form map and future land use map. The proposed city CM zoning district permits uses which fit the context of surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. And the request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Council, please vote.
I already did.
No, this is the third one. Oh, and that passes 9-0. Now we are moving on to our business, general business portion of the agenda. Item I1 is a resolution approving fire department to utilize design build for the renovation of fire station number 14.
Move the item. I don't have anything on the bottom that says move. Okay, move the item. There you go.
So that has been moved by Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Dr. Wells. Did you get your second?
Mhm.
You did. Council, please vote. And that passes 9-0. Item number I2 is a resolution approving the City of Greensboro opioid settlement funding plan fiscal year 23, fiscal year 24.
Second.
So,
Mary Kay.
so we're trying to get our verbal motions and the screen at the same time. So if you're going to make the motion, please do it verbally
see.
loud also.
Yes, ma'am.
So it is moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Mrs. Hoffman. Council, please vote.
Councilmember Holston, please.
That passes 9-0. We will take I3 and I4 together. I3 is a resolution approving bid in the amount of $8,855,208 and authorizing execution of contract 2021-007A with Jimmy R. Lynch and Sons, Inc. for the Water Booster Stations Phase 1 project. And item I.4, ordinance to amend the Water Resources Capital Project Revenue Bond Fund budget to establish funding for the Water Booster Stations Phase 1 construction project in the amount of $9,578,7852. Council, please vote.
So did you see, Mayor, I pressed the buttons? Did it not? come up?
It didn't show up that there was a. So, Mrs. Hightower, do you have a question?
Yes, I did. So I'm looking at the goals, and I didn't get anyone to explain to me, maybe Larry can, why the goals were not met. Even though the M goals were, but the W goals were totally off mark. They were, there was only 3%. And I'm just curious to know why that was occurred. I mean, you have a good list here, but since we're in 27 counties, and the WB goal was 15.5, but they only met 3.6.
Again, Councilman Hightower, I can't speak to the specific subcontractors themselves, but I will note there are 7 WBE companies that are involved in the project. So at least from a broad perspective, that's encouraging. The specific amounts, however, as you absolutely point out, were low compared to the goal. I am encouraged that the MBE participation, however, was over 14%.
Yeah, the M was 14%, even though its goal was 15.3. And so technically they didn't meet that goal either. So basically they didn't meet the goal at all. So with the goal set this high, and goals aren't set without reviewing people being available. So availability of those
So they did
trades.
go through the subsequent good faith efforts, and actually it's listed here as 50 points because that's the minimum that's required. They actually scored higher than that in their total points. So that's the next step once if either the M or the W goal is not met. So they did go through good faith effort and were found to have met the criteria for that.
Yeah, I realize that, but it's just kind of glaring when one is, they both have such high numbers, but one is significantly lower, and the W was significantly lower, almost 12% lower than the actual goal. So just wonder what we can do better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That item did pass 9-0. Do we have a motion and a second on item I4? So that is moved by Mr. Holston, second by Dr. Wells. Council, please vote. That passes 9-0. Items I5 and I6. I5 is a resolution to approve the design services contract in the estimated amount of $2,270,500 with CPL Architects. And item I6, ordinance to establish garage facilities bond 689 and to appropriate $2,270,500 for contract award with CPL Architecture for project design services. Is there any comments or is there? Mr. Holston, you had a question?
So this is.
This is moving.
Not on, I'm sorry, excuse me. The original contract was for 139,000. And then the change order has come in for 2.3 million.
Yeah, so now we are moving from those sort of conceptual drawings. In fact, I hope maybe you got to see a couple of them. They were in your legislative conference room that you ran earlier this evening. Now we're moving to actual design work. So this is a much more substantial work effort, and this gets us prepared for construction, hopefully next year.
How much more? I mean, that's a big jump to
Well,
me.
it's essentially a whole new project.
Oh,
We're
okay.
moving from really kind of pretty pictures to actually designing the facility itself.
I got you.
Mr. Olson, that answer your question?
For now, yes.
Thank you. There was a motion and a second on that item. Council, please vote. And that passes 8-1. Item number I6. Yeah, but you got to say it out loud too. So moved by, I thought it was moved by Dr. Wells, seconded by Mrs. Thurm. Council, please vote. Yeah. So, and we can talk about this after the meeting, but when the vote screen is up, I can't see or access who requests to speak. So I might need the iPad set up for both screens to have one and the other, but it also makes it, once the vote screen comes up, they can't request to speak. And, you know, to those who are watching this, we're trying to learn how to use this new system. So the next couple of meetings might be a little bit more clumsy than usual. So that passes 8-1.
Madam Mayor, can I just ask one question?
Okay.
I mean, I literally tried to get in. I thought I had gotten in. They saw it. Can you please send me the like 2 point, whatever the number is? To me, that's an aggressive. I don't understand how it could be that high for this project. Because what'd you estimate the total cost of the project?
30 million plus,
So it's 30 million. What's plus mean?
at least 30 million.
So
30 to 35 million, maybe max, hopefully no more than that.
So you're looking at an 8% roughly cost to just design the building.
Yes, sir.
That's insanely high. From what, I mean, I've done commercial properties. To me, that's high. So
it's.
I would just be curious of when the RFP went out, what responses, Mr. Manager, we got back? I just, maybe y'all have it probably already documented. I would just like to see where everybody came in. Thank you.
Now we move on to item number I7, which is an ordinance amending chapter 6 of the Greensboro Code of Ordinances with respect to buildings and building regulations. Somebody want to speak to that? Mr. McDowell?
Sure, it's basically a cleanup item. Historically, the city operated a journeyman program where you could come in and basically take a test and demonstrate that you have the capability to do basic electrical tasks and be able to work under a licensed contractor. Contractors have generally taken on that task themselves now. So it's become pretty much a redundant program. No one really uses it a lot anymore. And as most everyone in this room is aware, we're woefully behind in electrical inspections due to staffing and such. So we're trying to refocus on core business and just cleaning up miscellaneous things that we don't need to administer anymore.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on that item?
Move the item.
Moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Ms. Abuzawader.
Or vice versa.
Council, please vote. That passes 9-0. Item number I8 is a resolution approving a change order in the amount of $192,000 for contract 2019-018 for Brees Enterprises, Inc. for the Bernard Street and Primrose Avenue water and sewer improvement projects.
Second.
That was moved by
Mr. Holston.
Mr. Holston,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Johnson. Council, please vote. And that passes 9-0. Item I9 is a resolution approving bid in the amount of $517,000 and authorizing execution of contract 2022-0380 with Systems Contractors LLC for the Bryan Park Enrichment Center HVAC Maintenance and Repair Project.
Second.
Mrs. Hightower, has a
Thank you,
comment?
Madam Mayor. Yes, I do. Have a quick question. And I had some conversation today about this. I still continue to be concerned about and I'm hoping the disparity study is going to address this. But I think that I had the issue with this I9. Yeah, I think I wrote down I had an issue with combined goals. I believe this one had the combined goals that I found. And so I still continue to have an issue when we combine goals. When our policy that we've written says 5%. And of course it says 5% and or if it's only 2 trades. But I look at this work and I'm wondering how it could only be 2 or more trades. There are 3 businesses here. But again, my concern with combined goals is I still say that always when you combine the goals, minority businesses, Black businesses, particularly, sometimes don't benefit. However, in this particular case, the MBE in this one, but he got 2%, 2.7%. I just like for us to put, as the Griffin and Strong, as they're doing our disparity study, to really evaluate this. am not sure this was not a recommendation from the last disparity study. And so I'd really like for that to be focused on, because I am concerned about it. And I just want us to make sure that we're doing all we can. We're spending a lot of money, as you know, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a motion and a second on that. Council, please vote. And that passes 9-0. Item number I-10 is a resolution to authorize to contract for fiscal year 2022-2023 homeless prevention funds in the amount of $777,291 with Family Service of the Piedmont, Greensboro Housing Coalition, Greensboro Urban Ministry, Interactive Resource Center, Room at the Inn, the Servant Center, Youth Focus, and YWCA of Greensboro.
Move the item.
We do have a few speakers on this item.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
do I need to recuse myself as chair of the board of the Greensboro Housing Coalition? I request to recuse myself from this vote if it's included.
Is there a way that we can
Package.
take the Housing Coalition out of it and allow Mr. Holston to vote on the balance? I think we can just do that in two motions. If that would be your preference, Mr. Holston.
That'd be fine.
Okay, so we will go to the speakers first, but the motion should be that list minus the Greensboro Housing Coalition.
Should I participate in the conversation discussion?
Unless it is directly related to the Greensboro Housing Coalition.
Okay.
So we'll take it. Why don't we take the first item, which are all of those entities minus the Greensboro Housing Coalition.
I will amend my motion to that.
Okay. So just Mrs. Johnson, you're going to move it at the
I moved. it,
the
but
appropriate time.
Yeah. at
And
the
who
appropriate
will
time.
second it at the appropriate time?
I had mashed second, but I don't know. if it
Mrs.
took.
Hightower. All right, so our speakers are Del Stone, Louis Medina, Toad, and Emma Holland.
Good evening. I'm Del Stone with the Working Class Analysis Organizing Alliance. So I know how City Council loves an awareness week, and I think that they would be interested to know that the week of October 17th is International Charity Fraud Awareness Week. And instead of passing this agenda item, which I'm against, I think that they could more usefully pass a resolution that recognizes this week and honor it by educating themselves on the real problem of fraud in the nonprofit sector. I think that would do more good than the proposed item and perhaps make them aware of the fraud within it. Why is $777,000 going to institutions such as the IRC, which every member of the Houseless community will never speak to views as a useless corporation, if not an actively harmful one? Where is the $275,000 to the IRC actually going, besides towards the six-figure salary that Executive Director Christina Singleton takes home? Why is the IRC getting more money than even institutions that actually provide housing? Speaking of those, let's look at one of them, Room at the Inn. This is a fundamentalist organization that imposes its beliefs on those who stay there. When you check in, you're forced to sign paperwork agreeing to policies such as enforced prayer at nightly dinners. You can only leave for approved housing or doctor's appointments, and you have to check out every time. You cannot even have basic items such as lighters. And if you become pregnant, you have to sign paperwork saying that if you decide not to keep the baby or the staff deem you unfit, then you have to give the baby to a Christian organization for an adoption. You essentially have to trade your child for shelter. So that's the kind of organization that's providing shelter with this money, which the IRC doesn't even do. We know that Michelle Kennedy, the Neighborhood Development Department Director proposing this dispersal, is very friendly with the IRC Executive Director, Christina Singleton. Council members like Goldie Wells are or have been on the IRC board and should also be recusing themselves. There are serious conflicts of interest here. Not to mention the fact that these folks are utterly out of touch with the houseless community. Wells said of Marcus Smith, a houseless man, when police hogtied and killed him, that maybe it was his time to die. Candy has admitted her own silence and complicity in the shameful mishandling of the Marcus Smith case. We're supposed to trust that people like this know how best to serve houseless people. This agenda item is a massive giveaway to corporations, which all nonprofits are, across the industrial complex. Nonprofit executives here in the city take in hundreds of thousands of dollars that never go towards accomplishing the mission or helping anyone else, just towards bureaucracy and paying themselves. They don't care about solving crises like homelessness, because then the resume padding pet projects wouldn't continue to exist. To make money, they do this. They cuddle up to city council buddies and they beg. But when someone who's homeless asks for money, they're a freeloader. They're a criminal. The actual criminals are the ones who take grant money like this from people in need to line their own already gilded pockets. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Louis Medina. I'm with the Working Class and Houseless Organizing Alliance. We've said it 100 million times. We've been saying it since we formed this organization. You heard it probably before us. The only solution to houselessness, drum roll, is houses. But yet y'all have put our money, our tax money, and given it to organizations that do not provide houses, except for the one that my comrade just mentioned, where you have to, I think, trade your unborn child for shelter, right? And then one of the organizations, I don't really know what the IRC does, but I know they don't provide houses. I think I've been told that they give directions to people. They provide resources or, lead them to organizations that actually do something, but I don't think they need $275,000 to give people directions. In fact, I'll just do it for free. There are 100,000, is that right? 100,000 or is it 10,000? I don't even know. There's a lot of vacant units in Greensboro. Right? I could have taken that money and started putting them together and moving people in them. Instead, you just give it to people who pay themselves. I mean, like y'all do. Anyway, that's all I gotta say.
Homeless emergency. Last meeting you had where you voted on a package. You didn't even know how many homeless there were in the city. I bothered to ask, around 500. The city I come from, Grand Rapids, Michigan, we have a third less population than you, and we have twice the number of homeless. We saw a 17% increase in a single year. That's an emergency. What are they doing there? They're investing all their money into long-term solutions. They're building more Section 8. They're working with tiny houses. They're providing homes at a rapid pace and expediting Section 8 vouchers. Here, so far, you've passed what? The pallet houses? Those are about the size of jail cells with 2 bathrooms for 80 people. Those are temporary shelters. It's worthless. I mean, the giveaways that you're presenting today, like Louis just said, $275,000 for the IRC. I go to the IRC while I'm here. We've got a whole warehouse of things that they don't give out. They don't need this. I mean, what do they actually do? Nothing, very little. I could see a little more money going to the herb because the herb actually provides a service. But the rapid speed at which you're passing these, I mean, it's like it just seems like there's going to be a conflict of interest somewhere. Your county commissioner is holding, these top secret meetings. These meetings are not open to public, which is funny because that violates North Carolina state statutes. They do not fall under the criteria for closing it to the public. We've reached out. No one knows the location, and that's unheard of. So when it comes to crosses, what you're doing is you're passing these measures that are cruel and inhumane. The proposals I heard from the county commissioner when I spoke to Skip outside of the last meeting, which was open, he wants to 100 bed for mental health and 100 beds for drug addiction. He also wants to ease the laws around commitment. That sounds like gentrification through mass incarceration. It's inhumane. He's also proposing a 40-person homeless outreach, team. Up north, we do it with 15. They're just dedicated. They're a lot more efficient. I mean, nothing I've heard proposed by you sounds even remarkably like you want to solve the solution. So what is the real emergency here? Is it the aesthetics of downtown? Well, that's just sick.
Hello, my name is Emma Holland. I'm a street outreach and housing specialist at Tiny House Community Development. Shelter services is on this list of funding you have at a total of more than $200,000. Shelters are Band-Aid solutions. If you've never been to a shelter before, I urge you to take a visit without giving the shelter a heads up and ask yourself, truly, would I sleep here? Would this be the best solution to someone in a crisis or chronic homelessness? Then ask the staff what the rules are and how long folks can stay at the shelter. I hope you notice that street outreach is not on the list of recommended funding. For those of you who do not understand what street outreach means, it consists of connecting those to services and housing who otherwise might not seek out those resources, the most vulnerable of the community. Street outreach teams are the ones locating folks, entering them into HMIS, and providing essential services such as obtaining identification documents, case management, accessing healthcare, job searching, and much more. Street outreach teams follow folks from the streets to housing no matter how long the process takes. Back in July, Tiny House applied for $84,000 to maintain and expand our street outreach team to reach more of Guilford County. We were then told by Michelle Kennedy that the city decided that the two street outreach teams who applied, Tiny House and the IRC, would need to work in collaboration in order to obtain this grant money. A meeting was held on August 11th, and it was agreed that the next step was that the funding recommendations go in front of the council as a collaboration grant, with the condition that Tiny House employees stay off IRC property until the collaboration went into effect due to previous issues. We were then notified via email on October 12th that the city has decided to no longer recommend this funding due to duplication of services. This RFP process was extremely disorganized and not transparent at all. Lastly, I heard remarks from the last city council meeting that you all felt like you had to do something to solve the problem of homelessness since it seems to keep coming up as an issue. I think you misunderstood. When people from nonprofits, mutual aid groups, and faith organizations come here to speak to you, we are telling you exactly what we need to keep doing the work that gets folks housing. We're not asking you to invent a solution. We're asking for adequate funding, acknowledgement, and to be heard when we see a problem in the city that is making it more difficult on the unhoused population that we serve. I ask that you start listening and having your actions and your votes reflect that of the people you work for. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Stern?
A couple of points first for the speakers. Just so you know, we don't have apartment complexes at this point that will accept the vouchers. We have vouchers going unused because we don't have units to accept them. We do not have the capability of forcing them to use them at this point. I understand your concerns, and I actually share some of your concerns. I'm sure you'll be surprised to know. And one of those, I have a list actually. But one of those is how we ensure that these organizations that are providing beds and shelter are actually providing the beds and shelter we think we're supporting. My understanding is that right now, all shelters in Greensboro are still operating in a 50% capacity because HUD hasn't come out with new regulations. Can somebody confirm that that's right for me?
That is correct. The shelters that are currently within city limits are, to the best of my knowledge, operating at 50% capacity. HUD came out with guidelines around non-congregate shelter settings not quite 2 years ago in the height of COVID. They have not made new recommendations to change that back to full shelter capacity. So there hasn't been any new guidance from HUD as it relates to that.
Are shelters required to run on those guidelines, or do they have an option, and who controls that?
Certainly any agency has the right to make their own determinations about what their capacity can be. Any organization could decide to move back to 100% capacity at any point. That's an organizational level decision.
I have some concerns about us fully funding these organizations and then us taking on the winter housing bill at hotels if they're only operating at full capacity. It's my understanding that, one of these organizations only supported one family last year. And we gave them a lot of money. I think we need to build in some accountability here. I don't feel comfortable funding at these levels when we don't have information on who's being served, how they're being served. We're paying almost $95,000 for a hotline, and we don't have any stats on how many calls they're taking. Now, we know that because of the high housing prices right now, they're taking a lot of calls, but how much of that is hotline versus regular? I just think we need some more information and some more numbers on these. I don't know, Madam Mayor, I know you're on the task force along with Councilwoman Hightower and Mr. Matheny. I don't know if you all have discussed the level of capacity that the shelters are using. But if we're looking at a crisis situation here as far as a winter shelter, and certainly, in general, then I think we need to come to some conclusions, because I have a problem funding shelters at the full value if they're only having half the people. In addition, I'd like to know more information on how these shelters select who they're sheltering and who gets to make those decisions. My sense is, and from what I've heard from folks, is that each shelter gets to just make a decision of who they're going to house. And I understand that. But if they're given the decision between someone that is nice and timid and doesn't need medication and doesn't need monitoring versus someone that's in maximum crisis, it feels like we're leaving those that have the highest level of needs on the street to get worse rather than helping those people. I don't know the answer of how the continuum of care and the task force can solve these problems, but I certainly think there's something that we need to answer quickly, because I don't think this is operating correctly. So those are, I know I mentioned a lot of questions. I don't know whether any of those questions can be answered tonight, but they're concerns that I have in terms of going forward.
Mr. Matheny?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the more in the last 2 months that I've gotten up to date and more knowledgeable about this whole problem, the more disappointed, concerned, and eye-opening I have become on what a cluster it is. So we had a consultant come in from another part of the country and walked around on the streets and got down and really spoke to a lot of folks and came back and gave us an assessment last Thursday, a preliminary assessment. Showed a video of a housing place, beds 6 feet apart, plenty of room, completely empty. There may have been a fourth of the beds that were in use that could have been. And to hear Ms. Kennedy, she's right. I mean, the organizations can make the decision to house these folks, and they're not doing it. Like, what in the world are we doing? The city partnered with Partnership Homes. We've got an empty building. Like, what are we doing? Seriously. All these organizations, and I'm sure there's some great ones in here. There's also some overlap and some gaps. I can tell you, looking at this video, and y'all will see it when I get the full proposal from what this person did. And it was an unsheltered person trying to go in to stay that took the video and gave it to us. That's how frustrating they are. Folks, when I said, and I was misquoted a couple weeks ago or months ago, whenever it was, holding folks accountable, to Councilwoman Thurm's point, we have to hold the organizations accountable. And for us to sit here and learn that we are funding organizations or partnering with organizations that have not made the sensible decision in which to house people based on last year's, 2 years ago, that's our fault. We should be holding these organizations accountable. They should be their board should be holding them accountable. I can tell you right now, I get held accountable all the freaking time. Why can't they be held accountable? So, Mr. Manager, I would love for every organization that is on this recommendation, I want to see their latest report in hard copy. I know we're going to burn some trees. I apologize for that, but I'm old school and I need to see a hard copy of their latest report. For example, DGI puts in a report every 6 months now to the city of Greensboro stating what we do. I want to know what these folks do. I want to know how we're holding them accountable. I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And it seems like we just gloss over and we pass things because that's what we've done. For example, Councilwoman Thurm, the $95,000 for the hotline. I don't know when the last time that's been bid out. I don't know what the 95, maybe it is $95,000. That's a hell of a lot of money that maybe we need to review. And I know we were talking to Ms. Kennedy about, that's something we've done. Well, I'm just curious, like, have we looked at it lately? And the selection process, what I continue to hear is we have organizations, and I've met with a few, there's barrier to entry that is related to funding mechanisms. And I think from a city council perspective, one of the things we need to figure out is how to continue to knock down the barrier to entry for some of these folks, whether they just to make sure that we can get them housing, whatever their needs are. But the selection process concerns me on some of these organizations, that they are picking and choosing folks that, to Councilwoman Thurm's point, would rather serve, and leaving those that probably need it more to literally rot on the street. And we had an instance last week where a gentleman who's been downtown for about 7 years, really hardcore 5, that has deteriorated so bad, and then ended up being incarcerated last week. That is not what we need to be doing from a community. So I agree with Councilman Thurm. I'd love to see hard copies of each report. And if there's other organizations that we have funded that are supposed to help get people off the street, I would love to see a hard copy of their last report that the city has funded, because this is a cluster and we got to do better.
Mrs. Hightower, can you give me a minute before you speak? I do just want to say that all nonprofits who receive money from the city of Greensboro are required to file a report every year, and they are on the city's website. I think you can just Google Greensboro audits and you can see all of the reports. So all of these agencies who received money are required to report to the city how they did it, and it is posted to our website. Nonprofits are not required to report what they do with non-city money, only what they do with city money and how that was spent. So that is already being done and it is available on the website. Mrs. Hightower?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, because that's what I was about to say as well. People are asking for stuff that's out there. They already do. From Housing Coalition, all of them already do. Many of these agencies on here tonight do the work. And I know they do the work because I personally have interactions with them. If people have interactions with others, then you will know. You can't stand by the wayside or get comments from others and make those kinds of judgments. I have personally called these shelters and asked if they have room, and they don't have room for families that are in their cars or coming from the Gifford County school system. I have personally sat on the phone with the shelter director and the school social worker because the mother needs medication and is not getting the kids to school. So to say that people are going to the shelter because they're quiet and passive is a lie, is inaccurate. I know for a fact that this is going on and the school system is trying to figure out how do we get the kids to school because mom is sleeping late and won't get up because she's taking medication. She can't get up. That is somebody you're working with that needs help, needs mental health as well. That's where you have your case management, your intense case management. I have personally sat on the phone and because they've contacted me to see if the city's got resources. So that's an inaccurate depiction of what's going on in the shelters. I don't know who the one you're talking about. It's all one family. I know there's a shelter that's down a room. There's a shelter that's down 86 rooms because the building has some serious problems with it. And so they can't safely stay there and put them there. So I think what we really need to do is hear from the COC and those agencies that you questioned what they're doing about how they're doing the work, because while it may not be getting done to the level that you feel it ought to be getting done, it is some work getting done. It's a lot of homeless people out there that we don't know about. Yeah, there are some things that need to be adjusted. And I do have some concerns about some of these on here as well, because we've heard time and time and time again that people have come here and said that they are not being served. And yet we continue to fund them. We continue to flood them with funding and they're not getting served. And I think that piece of it needs to really be reevaluated, not pick on the one who just got a small amount of dollars to try to do a big amount of job. But everybody needs to be accountable, everybody. We need to stop doing that. And what we're doing is ostracizing certain ones. So I would strongly suggest that we set aside a work session for the COC to come. Speak before us, Mr. City Manager. Let us hear the work that they actually are doing. As we sit in that meeting with the county and we heard a recent ask from them to do the work of $9 million over 4 years. People say, oh my God, that's a lot of money. But by the time you pay caseworkers and pull all this information together, try to house individuals, we don't have enough housing. We've got an apartment building right now in District 2 that has been boarded up for almost 10 plus years. Been boarded up that could be housing people right now. But it's boarded up. So we sit here and we say those things, but yet we throw rocks and then we hide our face. We got to stop doing that. Those apartments, if we got them back online, that would help with housing as well. So I think we need to really seriously evaluate all of this, all of it. Not just tonight, but all of it. Because I hear from a lot of people. And I talked to the COC, I talked to, quite honestly, Salvation Army today. She took 2 people today who were getting put out of their apartment complex to try to get them in hotel. There's a hotel program as well as rental assistance to try to keep one person in their unit. They are out there doing the work. They really are. And this right here, what I just heard tonight is ultimately wrong. But I know where it comes from. And it's wrong. And I would like for us to hear from themselves. And Madam Mayor, also, Mr. City Manager, in the future, when you have an item like this with as many on here as there are, I would like for them to be broken out and separated. Because there's some I would vote no for, as opposed to voting yes in totality. But I know some of the work these individuals do, and to hear this, Greensboro Housing Coalition, I talked to her today too. They're accessible, they are helping, they're on the street, they're doing the work, but it takes money. Some of this takes money. You know, let's be real. But we need those partners to help do the work.
Thank you. Dr. Wells?
Well, since the last meeting when we voted to buy the pop-up shelters, it's been just a lot of talk, lot of questions, and I've become really concerned about it because we just heard the housing director say some of these are operating at 50%. Now, if we have the continuum of care, which is their focus is on homelessness, and we have all of these organizations, and then we're spending money to get pop-ups because they're doing half of the capacity. That is a concern. That's a real concern. There may be some, and Councilwoman Hightower was talking about the people she talked to, and there may be some who are doing an extra job, but there may be, it sounds like, some that are not. And if we are concerned about homelessness, everybody has to get involved. And the concern that Councilwoman Thurm has is, should we be giving money? There's those who are doing a good job, but should we be just giving money to those who are not doing what they're supposed to do? And that's house people. And if the people are on the street, they're not being housed. So I'm concerned about it too, because it is a lot. And there is that organization, that continuum of care, and that is their mission and their goal. They're supposed to house the people. And all of these folk that belong to that group ought to make sure that we wouldn't have to spend a whole week. We still may have to buy something, but we should make sure we're using to full capacity before we have to go to extra measures. And since that decision we made last week, I found out that there are some other measures that need to be addressed, rather than us just jumping up doing this when there are hot beds. I understand there are 160 beds somewhere that are just there. Then Councilwoman talked about you said something about the place they weren't using the beds or something, but anyway, they weren't doing it because they needed some renovations. So when we see things like that, maybe the renovations should be done by us so that we could use the beds that are already there. It just doesn't seem like real good sense for us not to know what each one is doing. How many beds do you have? How many are you are being occupied? If they're not, what's the reason? What can we do to help before we just assume that everybody's doing their job? And we still have people on the street, and then we spend money to buy the pop-ups. So yeah, I'm concerned about that.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I'm glad we're having this conversation because some of these I'm very familiar with. Several years ago, the program that the YWCA did. I was there for the presentation and some of the others. But I think I would agree with Sharon. We need to have a meeting with every one of these agencies and the heads of these agencies, and we need to ask the questions that you just mentioned, Goldie, and perhaps more questions. So Tammy, thank you for stimulating or putting out what your feelings were, because I agree, we need to really look at this, because I know some of them are not even housing people. So we need to know the holistic picture of what is going on in this area. We say that housing is our top priority, that homelessness is one of our priorities, and we need to be as educated as we possibly can. So I wouldn't want to vote on this tonight. I would want to set a meeting. I'd like to hear from the CEOs and get the information that we really need to make the decision we're being asked to make.
So let me just say, we've had this list since August. It was on an August agenda and it was taken off for more study. We are now at a very time critical time that, we are under a freeze warning either this evening or tomorrow. We've got to be able to enact those white flag shelters. We all know very well that housing first and rapid rehousing is the end goal. But we also know that we need people sheltered in the winter. And part of the issues that we've had during COVID is we have spent so much money on emergency things that we have not been able to focus on more brick and mortar. What we've had because of COVID and other things are those lost opportunity costs. And that's when we're putting money into shelters and not to the long-term housing first and rapid rehousing. You can't do one without another. We can't tell people who are out on the street, sorry, we can't shelter you right now because we're looking at housing first and we've got to build those housings. We've got to be able to do both things at the same time. And as I said, we've had this list since August. Every one of these people are on the COC. All of these organizations are a member of the COC. We did get a kind of a wish list from the COC last month, and certainly I think we can bring it to council. But even on that wish list, there was a lot of overlap. So that list, I think, needs to be fine-tuned a little bit, what they foresee the next 3 years look like. We did approach the county. One reason why this was off the agenda was because we were hoping to partner with the county a little bit differently. But it seemed like we were moving a little too quick for the county, that we wanted them to really focus on some of these shelter services, and we were willing to help them build capacity. And we would then work on the brick and mortar, the long-term solutions, which came to housing first and rapid rehousing. I don't think that they could pivot quick enough. That maybe this is a discussion we can have with them next year, but we still have to focus on getting people housed, even if it's just temporary. It is getting cold out and we can't really put this off any further. I think we are in a position where we have to move forward with shelters for people who are on the streets today that we know need housing for this winter.
You're saying that we need to get these people off the street, and they're saying that these agencies are only doing 50% of what they're supposed to do.
Well, I don't know about the 50%. I mean, certainly we can ask them at what capacity they're working and that they should be paid according to the capacity that they are giving. If they are only doing 50% of the beds, then maybe when these contracts are drawn up, it'll have to be for 50% of what they asked for. Or did they ask for this money based on a 50% capacity?
I don't know. Those are the kind of questions we need to ask. Now, I know sometimes it looks like the pressure is on But if you find out that what you're doing may not be the right thing, I don't think you should just go ahead and do
Well, I
it.
think that's what
Use
staff,
discretion.
that's what staff needs to be empowered to do, that if they're working at 50%, then they are reimbursed at 50%. I think it needs to be, based on who is being sheltered and the number of beds that are being provided.
Do you all have insight into these numbers? Are these numbers assuming reduced capacity? What are they assuming?
Well, and we are trying to stay with the list, but
Sorry. So to back up just a second, I want to clarify a couple of pieces of this. So in front of you, the inclusion of all of the funding that you got, 2 of those pieces of funding do not come through housing and neighborhood development. They are essentially council directives that have existed for many years. One is the housing hotline with Greensboro Housing Coalition. The other is the $125,000 to the IRC for day room and white flag. Those are not part of our competitive RFP process. So that's just a reminder on those 2 pieces. The other piece of this has to do, when you talk about shelter capacity, yes, they are at 50% capacity. When you look holistically at how much we invest in shelter services, it's really minimal compared to how much it costs to actually run shelters. So the investment that we have recommended wouldn't change so through the application process, the agencies are able to say to us, this is the amount of money we're requesting. That's the way the process has always been run. So they come to us, they give their recommendation for how much funding they need from us for part of their work. In the scenario of shelters, we know we are not paying the cost for all of shelter providing at any organization. It's a small portion of what every shelter operates from. So that creates a couple of scenarios. One, in programs that we fully fund, we have the ability to give directives on how programs will be run and what the expectations are completely, right? For example, hotel shelter stays. We're able to say this is how that will operate because we're fully funding it. When we're only providing a small portion of funding, really the only thing we can force in that is that our funding completely is used for people occupying those shelter beds. And the amount of money that we're allocating would apply whether it's at 50% capacity or 100% capacity. So all of the things that are in front of you, everything with the exception of 2 new rapid rehousing programs are the exact same funding amounts and the exact same organizations that they have been for a number of years. Many of those organizations saw funding decreases in their funding recommendations from us based on their spends from last year and the numbers from last year. And I can answer more specific questions if.
any questions for Michelle? Mrs. Hoffman?
Thanks, Michelle. That explanation was somewhat helpful. I think I just want to be sure that, what our process is for monitoring what's going on and being certain that our financial commitment to these organizations is being met appropriately, and then holding the organizations accountable. And, I think that I need some reassurance on that. And, just to report out what an organization has done on some sort of annual basis, it's not very helpful to me.
So
It really doesn't cut it. So
Sorry, Councilwoman Hoffman, to your point, I agree with that. When I came in last year, the year was already in effect. And so the expectations for reporting were already kind of declared. For this year, one of the things that we standardized was regardless of funding source, every agency will have the same reporting expectations, and they will be monthly reporting expectations. There will also be a mid-year review that includes client interviews, feedback from people experiencing homelessness in each of these organizations and the experiences that they've had in those organizations, and a determination of how you've spent the funds up to that point, which will determine the second half of the year's funding. If you're not spending the money, we need to do something different. One of the issues that we've seen year to year are agencies that are not able to spend the funds within the fiscal year. And so extensions have historically been given carrying into the next year. And I don't want to see that happen. You're allocated this funding for a 12-month period of time. We have timeliness guidelines from HUD that we need to follow and stick to. So we are trying to put those processes in place. Our grants compliance officer and our coordinator of homeless services have worked really hard for those reporting guidelines and those monthly reporting expectations that will be in play for this year's funding cycle for exactly the reasons that you described. We have had a variety of ways that agencies were expected to report, and there was nothing that was standard. And until we create that baseline and a standardization and an expectation for what you are actually providing to the community, we can't really monitor it well. We can't see what you're doing well. So that is baked in to our plan for this year.
That's good. I think you've really answered my concern regarding that we have established the guidelines and we have a monthly and monitoring system and program in place. Nothing to do with housing, but I just have to
I have a question.
talk about this for a minute.
Whenever
Zach, I think it was last week that you sent us the note regarding a homeless gentleman who was able to leave town. And but and was being helped by one of the ambassadors, I believe, and was taken to the IRC to shower and change clothes in order to catch his bus. And apparently maybe just missed their deadline slightly by a few minutes or something and wasn't helped. We fund the IRC. We've been funding them for a long time. And, that was just disturbing to me. I think there have to be management decisions that can be made on the spot that are exceptions. And it seemed to me that this probably was one of those. Has nothing to do with housing, but an agency that we fund. And I was just very disappointed by that.
Yeah, he actually got there 10 minutes before the showers were supposed to close. And so technically they should have allowed him, but they turned him down. They also turned down a person trying to get bus tickets.
Yes, I'm just going to speak broadly on this. And this conversation does remind me of the conversation we had last week as we talked about the pallet homes. And I stressed strongly then that the pallet homes cannot be just a single focus, but we have to have a comprehensive plan that's going to address the broad spectrum of the needs when it comes to our housing situation, our housing crisis. And just listening to the comments this evening, it's going to take a lot of information to make sure that everybody is informed, that we do continue to be those good stewards of the funds that we have to allocate to mitigate, eradicate the homelessness, the unhoused, the unsheltered. And it's just important that we do that and that we get the proper information that we need. Council does need proper information. We need the organized, coordinated effort, and it needs to be something that is with a sense of urgency. We sit here in council, we sit here in chambers. I think the mayor mentioned that it is freezing. There's a freeze warning. And oftentimes we get comfortable in our comfort. There are many in our community who are not comfortable right now. And we can talk about it. We can push it to the next, we'll check our calendars and look at the next work session, the end of October, 1st of November. But these are critical times and we need to take action as quickly and expediently as we possibly can, but with a coordinated effort, with a plan, full spectrum, not just onesie twosie. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too worry about us not passing this tonight. And we know that we're actually going to have freezing temperatures this evening. So those who are left out in the cold will be left out in the cold. I do believe that every organization, and I appreciate Ms. Kennedy talking about there are going to be monthly checkpoints for organizations, because I think this is something that we too need to know that they are fulfilling with the funds that we are approving, we need to know that they are fulfilling their side of the bargain and that no one is left out in the cold. So, I really think here we go again. This has been kind of talked about since August. We've had 2-3 months to discuss this and bring up all the questions. But, the way I see it is many of these organizations are doing the work. The audits are on the city website. And I know that many of us Google these organizations all the time and check their 990s, do all of those things to make sure that they are in compliance. So I believe that we need to move forward on this and make sure that this winter, no one is left out in the cold. And this goes back to the pallet homes too. I never said that was the answer. I said we just need to do something so people don't freeze on the streets.
I agree with you.
yes.
And though I would like to have had more information, I'm not going to risk somebody freezing. So I'm going to support this, but I do want us to meet and hear from the executives, and I want us to ask the questions of
Yes.
them. Michelle, with your leadership in this process.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mrs. Hightower?
So, with the distribution of this money, because most of it's federal money, are there not requirements already for reporting?
There are requirements for reporting. There's a difference though in what is required for federal reporting guidelines and what, in my opinion, from a best practice standpoint from HUD and others, is really about getting to the meat of what organizations are doing. And that involves more than just getting documents back on paper. It involves speaking with the people that are receiving services. It involves site visits to agencies that are doing this work. It involves things like walking into a shelter and seeing if beds are empty on a night. Those levels of monitoring are what we're building in this year beyond any federal requirements that we have.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering why all of a sudden they've become inadequate when there are certain requirements that have already been out there that's tied to federal money or state money even, or local money even, because with other monies that we get, people have to report on. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden it's so lacking.
Well, Councilwoman
What's being
Hightower,
done.
I apologize.
I just don't get that. And I also, everybody on this list doesn't do shelter either, because I know there's youth focus who works with the youth. And of course, some of these agencies are small agencies, and this little bit amount of funding is what is needed. They're not able to carry funding. They don't have balances in their books that allow them to carry this funding. So they need this funding. I know I talked with, I believe it was Sierra Youth Focus. If I believe that's who it was, but anyway, because this funding helps them with programming as well. So beyond just simply sheltering, it is also to aid and abet these. I'm also looking at, so has Greensboro Housing Coalition's funding been increased within the last 15 years that they've been doing the hotline? Because I think their calls went from 300 a week to 1,500 a week. And it's not just the calls that they do. Yes, they do calls, but they do case management over the phone. I know I spent 10 minutes today with Robalini talking to her, and I'm just not a person experiencing homelessness, but bringing someone to them. So have we looked at, has their funding been increased?
So the funding amount for Greensboro Housing Coalition is the funding amount that they applied for this year. They haven't requested an increase in their funding amount in this year's application. I can't speak to all 15 years. I can tell you that to my knowledge, it has not been increased. But one of the things that's important when you're asking why is this an issue now, many of these organizations have historically been funded through NUSBOM, which didn't have federal reporting requirements, and it was a much less structured reporting matrix. in our efforts to make sure that NUSBOM is really directed at getting housing off the ground, we have reallocated funding sources to these federal funding sources. So that's more what this conversation is about. The housing hotline at GHC is certainly an asset to our community, but it also is the main number that you call when you're calling for housing counseling and other services. So not just directed to people experiencing homelessness. And I would make an argument that a vast number of the increase in calls has to do with ERAP funding and questions related to emergency rental assistance. Practically every agency that is part of ERAP has seen that kind of increase in calls while they've been administering this program.
But in some sense of the word, even if it's ERAP, it's still tied to homelessness, because if that person didn't get rental assistance, then they're gonna be put out. Because we've seen it go eviction court, and we've structured programs now where with UNC where if they don't get some kind of rental assistance, or if the landlord's not promised rental assistance, then they're faced on being on the street. And housing being at a premium right now, then they're subject not to have any other kind of way to be housed. So in essence, I see it all being tied together.
Yeah, certainly that's a part of homeless prevention, but it is directly tied to the emergency rental assistance program that's been going on and the volume of calls that those agencies have been receiving. You can almost directly tie that volume with when we started administering the emergency rental assistance program.
Call the question.
Okay, so the motion on the floor right now, it was moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded by Mrs. Hightower to fund all of the agencies with the exception of the Greensboro Housing Coalition. Council, please vote.
I didn't make that motion.
Yeah, Angie said
I did?
you did. Yep.
All right, beg your pardon then. It's so long.
And that passes 8-1. Now we need a motion to approve the Greensboro Housing Coalition, and Mr. Holston is excused from this item.
I make that motion.
So moved.
I can
Moved by
find it.
Mrs. Johnson, seconded by Mrs. Hightower.
I can find it on the screen here.
Council, please vote. And that passes 8-0.
Madam Mayor, I would just say, because I know a lot of you have gotten phone calls from agencies related to this funding because it is coming late in the year. I just wanted to confirm for all of you that Liz is actually upstairs preparing to send out contracts now. So they'll have their contracts by tomorrow morning.
Wonderful. Thank you. I know there have been a few that have been calling. That is the end of our official agenda. I'm glad that Mr. Borchers stayed here because there was a press conference today over at the Border Resources Center. Josh Stein announced a lawsuit that he had filed, I believe, in Guilford County Superior Court regarding foam that was used for firefighters out by the airport, which, has gotten into the groundwater system. We've talked about it a number of times. And actually the city of Greensboro has been extremely aggressive. And I think we've actually led the state in it. I just wanted council to be clear of what the Attorney General was doing today. It was not an action against the city of Greensboro. It was an action against the manufacturer of the foam. These are called Forever Chemicals. And we have spent considerable amount of money making sure that our drinking water is safe. And Mr. Borchers actually provided us with some expenditures that we have spent to date. And what's interesting about the list is that our expenditures go back to 2015. So we started looking into this PFOS and PFOA a very long time ago, before a lot of other communities were. To date, we have spent over $5.4 million in remediating this PFAS and PFOA. And we probably have, it could be another $60 million ahead of us when we finish the Mitchell water treatment plant. And what the Attorney General today did hopefully will help us recoup some of those expenses. The reason why I bring it up was because I want to make sure that the reporting is accurate and that the action wasn't against the city of Greensboro and didn't say that the city of Greensboro did anything wrong or the airport, because it was identified out at the airport. Mr. Borchers, I appreciate you staying here. I don't know if there's what you would like to add just to make sure that people have the most accurate information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. And I very much appreciate your support because just like Madam Mayor said, it goes all the way back to 2015 when this council approved our initial investigation for these forever chemicals. So again, I'm in gratitude and very thankful for council to continue to support our efforts to remove these chemicals from our watershed. And our number one mission in water resources is the health and safety of our customers. So we are devoted to that. We are dedicated to that. I know this council is and city manager is, and I very much appreciate all of the support. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Borchers about today's action? Thanks. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Boards and commissions, I think we'll just work through the break.
Have to.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes, I'd like to appoint Ann Hurd to the GTA board.
and who would she be replacing?
Nancy Hoffman, do you know who she's replacing? Do you know who Ann Hurd? I don't know.
Madam
What
Mayor,
district is she coming
excuse,
from?
Madam Mayor, that would be Wesley McGuire that she would be replacing.
Thank
And
you.
what district is that?
No, he's two. Wes is two.
Because Ann Hurd, I
Mr.
think
McGuire
three or
is
four.
in District 2. I'm not sure what
That-
district Miss Hurd is
And
in.
Hurd is not two, I can tell you that. And so Wes is two. And so that would be a Goldie, that would have been you. Unless whoever
Can
the
we hold
next
that till
person,
the next meeting?
yeah.
Make sure.
I'd like to appoint Andrina Coleman to the Cultural Affairs Commission.
Second,
She's in District
one.
1.
And that is
Why do we need to hold Ann Hurd?
because to make sure that there might not be an opening. She's in District 3 or
Okay,
4.
I'll hold it. That'll be fine.
But the second one,
Andrina
Adrena
Coleman,
Adrena,
Cultural Affairs.
is there a second on that?
Yes, I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mrs. Hoffman, boards and commissions?
Yes, Nick Barrett to the CVB replacing Denny Kelly.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Mrs. Thurm?
No, but I'm thinking that it's about time to get the Bryan Park off the list. If we can do that, my understanding is that's no longer in an existence.
Correct. I definitely will get it on the agenda here in the short term future
Okay.
meeting.
Is that the golf? Bryan Park Golf?
Yeah, that
It
is-
is. After review, it's a duplication. The Parks and Recreation Commission hears most of those items and the Bryan Park Commission really doesn't serve the same function since we
Okay.
privatized.
and it hasn't met in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So we need to
Okay.
clean that up, but
Thank you.
no, I don't have anything else at this time.
Dr. Wells? Mrs. Johnson, you did, Ms. Buzawader?
No one this evening.
Mr. Matheny? Mr. Holston
None this evening. Thank you.
and Mrs. Hightower?
No, none.
Okay, any council comments, Mrs. Hightower?
Yeah, just briefly to remind everybody early voting
Remind you,
start.
said brief.
She said it, not me.
She knows I said it.
Early voting starts Thursday, just to remind everyone, please make sure you do vote and go all the way down the ballot. It's critically important. And then congratulations to Bailey Village on the new apartments. 172 units in District 2, had the ribbon cutting on Saturday. Beautiful event and beautiful apartments. I was excited to be there, along with, I think, fellow council members, Bruce Wader, obviously Goldie, and certainly the mayor, and Hugh. Zach wasn't dressed and didn't come up front, so didn't know he was.
He had his son with him.
Okay, well, and Mr. Matheny was there. Well, I didn't see you up front. We all had it. Oh, okay. Well, then next time you gotta come, so we'll see you shining face. All right, thank you. And I did want to ask, Mr. City Manager, as we start looking at our new budget year, our Parks and Rec budget, our capital project, and our Parks and Rec budget has not been increased for years. It's hovered around between 16 and 18 million, and that is a quality of life. And as we talk about the rezonings and we're growing on the outer perimeters, that is a piece that we need to really focus on, making sure that we have as an amenity, our Parks and Rec. And I know there was some land a few years ago out Rehoboth, I believe, somewhere along there, Mr. Wilson, that I think was purchased maybe fire, but was never used. And
I think,
I'd like for us to.
Short Farm Road.
Sure.
I'll ask ACM McCray to provide some updates around that.
Okay, if you can, because that is really a topic of conversation here lately, that we continue to rezone and bring in development, but we're not looking at green spaces and we're not looking at parks and recreation. And then we also have certain areas that need improvement. I know we've had to do away with our playground equipment at Brown Recreation Center. But we do have youth that live in that area. And the more we make sure our youth can get engaged and be involved in our community, I think it addresses many of the issues that we continue to talk about, in the community. So I'd like for us to really look at that, Mr. City Manager, how we can increase that budget there to do some things substantial in our community, and particularly the capital improvement projects. Warnersville building is 50, 60 years old. And I know we're getting the ones in Chavis NOCO, and that's overdue as well. But if we can look to do some capital improvements with our Warnersville Center, our Gillespie Center. We lost someone who was doing a phenomenal job at Gillespie Grill for the community, because we got to stop eating fast food. We're dying at a rate 10 years earlier than our predecessors across town. So we need to really incorporate more healthy living, eating. So if you could look at that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bing. Mr. Holzman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do have just a couple. First, and I don't know if I'm talking out of turn. I see you down there, Dr. Wells. Just our very own Mayor Pro Tem was featured in a forum for the play Rebellious at Triad Stage. It was an absolutely awesome forum. The play is still ongoing, and it's about the history of the connection between Bennett College, the Bennett Bells, and the A&T 4. And it was a phenomenal forum, and Mayor Pro Tem shared some wonderful stories, and it was just awesome. If you have a chance to go to Triad Stage to see Rebellious, that'd be wonderful. Next is I do serve as the liaison for the War Memorial Commission. And many of the information, much of the information that they shared, I believe we've shared here before, but it's just this was the first of the gatherings since we no longer had the confines of the ACC in Greensboro. And I want you to know that the War Memorial Commission, the state of it is very strong. They are very committed to Tournament Town, to the passion, to making sure that the Coliseum, the GAC, the Tanger Center, and all the other attributes of this city are front and center. And I can tell you that there's not one person on that commission who thinks any differently. We are in good hands. Next is on this past Friday, I had the great opportunity as a part of Old North State Medical Society and some other community partners to include the 16 Cent Ministry, Family Service of the Piedmont, Jollo Upright Services, World Victory Church, the Medi Clinic, and Georgia Cheney, who himself is a homeless, unhoused individual. There was a vaccine clinic at the IRC, and very proud to say that we vaccinated over 50 of the participants there. It was just very nice to know that, especially with the oncoming cold and flu season, and also with the new variants of COVID-19, the BA.4/5 or the QB1.1, that we all take precautions and get the new booster. If you've been boosted already, the other two boosters, that's great, but everyone needs the new booster. So please go get it. And then today, spent some time over at Barber Park. The City of Greensboro's HR department sponsored the internal talent acquisition showcase. It was very nice. It's designed for existing employees who are in their roles and maybe want to look at some different roles or get some new skills and new tips. And it was based on a movie show theme. And as I was there, many employees came in and were looking for those tips. And it was just nice to see the up training, the up benefiting of our existing employees, not just always looking at the new ones, but also taking care of those that we have within. And finally, I was also with the group over at Bailey Village. Those 172 units are a great addition. It's a great quality addition for Greensboro, East Greensboro, downtown Greensboro East, whatever it may be called, and looking for more and more of that type of development in Greensboro as we continue to build out and with economic development. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Matheny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You're right. Bailey Village was pretty impressive. That event was pretty impressive. And Sharon's actually right. I was not dressed according to what I should have been wearing, which is why I was standing in the back. But it was interesting, and it was interesting. It was good. But that development further, that's a great development for East Greensboro. Mr. Manager, I appreciate your willingness to consider and review our public improvements policies, how we look at things when we're, trying to help development, trying to help Greensboro grow. We're positioned extremely well between Charlotte and Raleigh. I think Greensboro is going to continue not only to see the boom, the Toyota, certainly downtown's growth, East Greensboro's growth, all over growth. And when we have such growth, we need to be smart and logical on what demands we put on the backs of certain people, such as what we heard tonight. And last, I need a new definition for the term short. Like, I just got a few things to talk about. I need help with that.
I think it varies from person to person. Mary Kay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For weeks, I haven't had any comments at the end, so I do have just a few. Adding up my time, Mr. Matheny. No, as you know, I'm heavily involved with our international community, and our Hindu community asked me if anyone would like invitations to some of their Diwali festivities. You know, it's the Feast of Lights for them. And there's several activities. If you would like to attend, you can pass a couple on down. So that is coming up. I also wanted to give congratulations and kudos to all the departments and everyone, including the Greensboro Police Foundation, for the successful safety town they had at Barber Park. Oh, there were over 100 children who attended the one at Barber Park. As you know, there is one at Lewis Center as well, but I know the city's been heavily involved, the Greensboro Police Foundation. The children learned about pedestrian safety, train safety, fire safety, gun safety, water safety, playground safety, all of those things. And the store facades are from local businesses such as Smitty's, McDonald's, the Science Center, Fire Department number 7, Cone Health, Volvo, Be Safe Storage, Corey Corporation, Harley Davidson, and several others. So I know there are a lot of people to thank for that, but if we have 100 children who have learned about safety, it is so well worth it in our community. So kudos to all involved. Wanted to mention about the Greensboro Police Department hiring event tomorrow evening, 5:30 to 8 at the Public Safety Facility, 1510 North Church Street. Wanted to mention about as everyone has spoken so far, the play Rebellious at Triad Stage is phenomenal. If you haven't been, please go see it. It is something that you will not soon forget. And let's see, also attended Bailey Village. Yes, Mr. Matheny will make sure you come down front anyway next time. And the last thing I was going to talk about is, as you know, two things. Crime Stoppers, we have our fundraiser every year. I have tickets for the reverse raffle. That is not gambling, right, Mr. City Attorney? The reverse raffle.
I'd have to review the details.
Okay. But so it's going to be done virtual again. So you buy your tickets and you will be notified if you win something, but you can win up to $6,000. So there's that. And I have tickets if you'd like them. They're also doing an online auction that is going on now. Just go to the Greensboro Crime Stoppers, Guilford Greensboro Crime Stoppers Facebook page, and you can see that. Last thing. Today we had our Sports Foundation meeting and we had not met for several years, but it was just brought up today in our meeting that our amateur sports, I'm talking about amateur sports that come to the city of Greensboro. And I took a screenshot to make sure I had my stats correct. As you know, Mr. Richard Beard is now the CEO of the Sports Foundation. We just elected our new officers today, but the economic impact of amateur sporting events, and I'm talking about soccer at Bryant Park, I'm talking about the GAC, I'm talking about all of those things. From July 2020 to October 2022, we had 253 events. Remember, this is right in the middle of a pandemic, okay? July 2020 to October 2022, 253 events, 762,000 hotel rooms, 528,000 attendees, and $460 million in economic impact. $460 million. So we need to keep this momentum going. I am going to be a staunch cheerleader for any sporting events, anything we can do to help to get more sporting events here. This is what this can bring in. I said that was my last thing. I haven't spoken in weeks.
I have a tutu you can borrow.
Okay, but yes, I did fail to mention that the mayor was unable to attend, and I gave greetings to the Peace Corps launch in North Carolina. So I appreciate that, Madam Mayor. She was unable to attend, so I gave those greetings for her and mentioned the entire city council. So thank you. And I do believe I'm done now.
Thank you. To follow up on Mary Kay talking about amateur sports, I think on November 12th, we're going to hear about the World University Games. So, we've got our fingers crossed. That will be an absolutely huge event, and it's between Greensboro, the Greensboro region, and Seoul, South Korea. So, it's interesting to be on the global stage for something like that. Mr. City Manager, I know that we mentioned getting a cultural calendar together. That way, people wouldn't book things on important days. I know we were trying to book something for March, and I had to call Mary Kay today about the rules surrounding Ramadan and, what days we could have an event and what days we couldn't. So the sooner we can get that calendar, the better. The opening at Bailey Village really was great. It was a lot of fun, a lot of enthusiasm. And, my comment was that really sets the standard for growth in that area. That when people look at East Greensboro, they look at East Market Street, that they have something that they need to compare with. And it is a beautiful facility. One thing I did notice, we've talked a lot about the rebranding of that area, and I know A&T was involved in the discussions about the downtown east, and we don't have any signage up, and we need to kind of define that area, which was the A&T campus, Bailey Village, I think Bennett, and we need to get some good looking signs for that area, not just a street sign, but something that looks nice. And we've been talking about it for a while, so if we could go ahead and get that signage. Lastly, early voting starts on Thursday. So it's right around the corner. There are 15 early voting sites. Of course, for downtown, the old courthouse is available. You can look on the website, but early voting does start this coming Thursday. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I just want to give my condolences to Joyce Dixon's family, all the Dixons, and thank the family for all that she has done to improve the life, the quality of life in Greensboro. Her funeral will be Thursday, and so my condolences.
Dr. Wells?
I think everyone has said something about the ribbon cutting at Bailey Village. And of course, I'm very proud of that new apartment complex in District 2 and downtown East that the bishop talked about on Saturday. So thanks for all of you all coming, but I think all of us enjoyed the whole event, and our mayor represented us very well. She stood and made a speech that appealed to that audience. She tempered everything the way she should. Made a bow and everything. So it was really, really nice. Last week we attended, I don't know whether I've told you, we attended the elevation grant. I think I talked about that at the work session. Last Saturday, I attended the old L. Richardson neighborhood meeting. That neighborhood or association meets on the phone every month, but they consistently keep the meeting going, and they invite people to come in from the city and give them information. So I was glad to be able to be on that call with them. And I've been to see Rebellion too. It is a great play. But this morning I had the opportunity to go to the ribbon cutting for a vehicle. The Second Harvest Food Bank has now a mobile pantry. It's a big vehicle that has freezers and storage for food, and they'll be able to teach nutrition and then teach folks how to cook the food. It was a partnership, a donation by United Healthcare. So that took place this morning at the Renaissance Center. We've been talking about voting. The girls at A&T, Black Girls Vote, will be having a march on Friday. at 10:30, and they're going to march over to the Ag Center to vote. So all of us are saying, be sure that you participate in the early voting.
Mrs. Sir?
Just a couple of things. Number one, I'd like to congratulate the Transgender Task Force on holding their first ever forum and youth-focused forum for youth and their parents. And it was a great event, small but great, and I hope it'll grow with time as word gets out. But it was so great to see the way the task force had organized the event, you know, separate meetings for parents and for the youth, and then sharing information. And it was just really well done. And I want to congratulate the task force on that success. Tagging on to all the sports discussion and the sports council, the Charlotte Hornets did announce in the past couple of weeks an additional 5-year commitment to Greensboro and to having the swarm in Greensboro. And they're making a tremendous financial investment into the field house as well. I don't have that dollar figure here. I don't know whether somebody else has that with them to share, but they're making a tremendous investment into our community. And I look forward to seeing how we continue to grow with the Hornets and the swarm. My other item I don't know whether it's the city manager or assistant manager, Trey Davis. We talked briefly at our work session with GPD. I brought up the issue of how we look at college degrees and compensation for that. I did find an article recently since that meeting that talked about the correlation between the more highly educated your police force is, the less violence they tend to use. And I think that's an important thing for us to look at. I do want to see us get into a discussion about that before budgeting, before we start locking in numbers for next year. I'd like to have a concrete date for council to relook at how we view the college programs and how we compensate employees for college degrees. I would say it should be throughout the entire organization, not just in GPD and fire, but it's something that I think we are non-competitive on. We are losing candidates for our desperately needed positions. And I think it's something we've got to look at because we're losing really good people, local people that are graduating from our colleges and universities are going to other municipalities because they honor their degrees with compensation that we don't. So I just think we need to relook at that. And I would like to have a hard ask for recommendations and a discussion on that between council.
Mrs. Thurm, I appreciate that because I brought it up the last budget cycle. That our recruiters were actually having trouble when you go to college campuses, and that they weren't being paid any more than somebody who had a high school diploma, that really became an issue, especially when they were side by side with other police departments that did pay more for a bachelor's degree or associates. I do think it's something that we are really missing the boat on by not recognizing, we talk about our colleges, that we live in a town with 7 colleges and universities. And I'm sure that if we spoke to those presidents, that they would agree that a college degree should count for something, especially when we have students who are paying back student loans. You had mentioned about the article you had read. I've read an article also I wanted to bring up about the physical fitness of a police department. And it is that police officers who are physically fit are much less likely to use deadly force. because they are in better condition and they can de-escalate and do things without resorting to weapons. And I thought that was interesting. I'd like a little bit more research on that. And then what do we do as a police department to keep fitness levels up as they're on the force for a while? I think that is something worthwhile to look at as well. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yeah, I really didn't have anything, but I want to build on something that Mary Kay brought up in terms of sports tourism. And I want to talk about just one sport, and that's soccer. We have 20 fields at Bryan Park. Those 20 fields generate $40 million a year in economic impact. We have the opportunity to build 2 more turf fields there at this point, as soon as we are willing to do that. Then we have the opportunity to build another 20 at Bryan Park North. Now, I'll tell you, in the private sector, I think the approximate cost to build 20 soccer fields is probably about $35 million. And if in year number 1, you get a return on that investment of 40, that's a deal that in the private sector you do every day because of the return on investment. So I would just want to say that. And the other area that we have great opportunity is in lacrosse. I mean, Greensboro could conceivably become, if we're willing to make the investment in the next 5 years, a major center for youth sports. And there is a huge economic impact for that.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager?
Well, thank you. I want to kind of go back to the conversations you just had, Mayor and Councilwoman Thom, with regards to college education and pay. Previously, I think Councilwoman Hightower had also brought up pay equity study. And I'm wondering if this is something that could be done together rather than just done in separate ways. Because you mentioned it's not just for police, but even other employees citywide. And I think when you speak to pay equity, it has educational component, it has social component, it has race component, it has income component, and it could just be, if it's the pleasure of council, it could just be one and the same thing. I cannot just necessarily guarantee that that will be something that could be done prior to next budget, but we could necessarily gather data separately on what other communities are doing and separate that. But I'm just thinking, rather than pursue these 2 things separately, if it's the pleasure of council, it could just be one and the same thing.
From my standpoint, I think every day we aren't recruiting people into the upcoming classes especially because of the lead time of the fire department and GPD, that we are risking, as Chief Biffle said, next summer, our head count's going even lower. In theory, yes, I would like it to be included in that, but quite frankly, that will take some time to do. And I don't think we have the time. I think we need to move on that more quickly, because every day these policies stand in place, we're losing really good potential candidates.
And for me,
I agree. We need to be hasty about it.
well, for me, I'd like to see the pay equity study. I think a lot of times we focus on one side and not the other, and that's not equitable and it's not fair. And so what I'd like to know is, where are the numbers that say that people coming out of college are applying for police jobs? I mean, what are we basing that on? You know, to say, oh, well, if we do give more degrees, then they're going to be applying. In the world of after George Floyd, we know that minorities are not really applying for those jobs, particularly in law enforcement, as much as we think they are. And so I would like to see what those numbers are driving us to even look at that and say, I question that. I understand, that we should look at maybe rewarding all of our employees who have college degrees, if that's the case. But then we talk about equity. What is fair? What isn't fair? And that's the reason I asked for a pay equity study, because I hear a lot from some who say things are not being fair toward them, women alike.
So is that a muddy answer? You know, I
Yeah.
mean, we all talk about how important public safety is, and I think we have to move forward for recruitment and retention. You know, we are at a crisis point. We need to make sure that we have enough officers, both police and fire, to respond. That is something that we owe the city. And I do think that the paying people more for a college degree just makes sense. I mean, we had a program called Degrees Matter, encouraging people to finish their degrees to go further along through Guilford County. So here, you know, we had this program, Degrees Matter. And, you know, and we're saying, but it doesn't matter to us.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just want to know the direction from council as to, rather than be pursuing 2, 3 different things, I want to be able to focus on one thing. And I also want to quickly let you know, if we do it for one, it will have implications for the rest of the city's workforce.
And I think
And
it
I'm
should.
really concerned about that.
I think it should. I
It's
think
equity.
regardless of department, if somebody has a college degree, we're every level of this city, we are competing with other jurisdictions for staff that reward college degrees. And I think whether we're looking at police or whether we're looking at somebody that's working in field ops or in water resources, we should
But I believe
absolutely look at it for everybody.
I believe I just said that when we talked about pay equity. I believe that's what it said. Everybody, you have to look at for everybody. And I think we've done a good job of giving our police a lot more money than other areas. And so I don't hear them complaining anymore about getting paid and being compensated well.
I think I have a good, I think I have a good idea how we're gonna resolve this. So one, we're gonna do the pay equity study. It seems like that's a pleasure of council if I'm reading this right. While that may not necessarily be ready in time for next year's budget, we probably will gather some data from peer cities in terms of implication of college degrees, not just on our public safety officers, but also other key areas of the city. So maybe there's a way we can still do that, and that could be ready in time for discussions around the budget if we're gathering data, if that's okay. But we will still move forward towards a pay equity study separately. Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney?
I have nothing. Good night.
Madam Mayor, I have one other question for Mrs. Manager. Do we do job fairs when we're out doing job fairs specifically? Are we asking for information around college degrees and who has one and who doesn't when we create that?
Maybe Larry, you can speak better to that.
Councilor Hightower, would really depend on the job and the job fair. I mean, it's the conversation is about qualifications for the job. And some applicants would reference a college degree as part of that qualification list. Others would focus on experience, time and relevant jobs. So it's really up to the applicant when they make their pitch, whether or not that college degree is part of what they want to tell us about.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we're capturing that data, you know, that would lead us to feel this way. So, and I'm not saying that they don't matter. I think they all matter, even the 2-year associate degree, but the certification matters too, because people put effort into that as well. So I just wanted to know how that was working. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn, second, third,
All in
fourth.
favor, say aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.